And welcome once again to the 10-Minute Life Coach Podcast. This simple 10-minute podcast, 10 to 12 minutes is me talking. No intro music, no outro music, no big booming voice, and no sexy gals going in as well. It's just me giving you a quick 10-minute life lesson that you can hopefully take with you as soon as we're done talking and just do something with it right now. Sometimes it doesn't work that way. Sometimes it's something that just reinforces what you're doing as a great thing, and that's part of the mission, to make sure that you know you're doing a great thing. And if you're not, well, give you a little insight on things you can do to help your personal and your professional life get a little bit better. And today, that's the very simple message for today. It's the fact of just finding something that you know is going to help you get better and doing it. The best way to get things done, like I said in an earlier broadcast, is repetition. You just do it over and over again. So today, it's a bit of a repetitive message, but we're going to talk about finding something that works and just sticking to it. It's a little different than saying repetition. Repetition is literally doing the same thing over and over again until you get it right. When you find something that actually works, that is right, then you just stick with that thing until something changes. It either doesn't work anymore, or you find something else that intervenes and make it work a little bit better. It's pretty simple. So, for example, this podcast, the 10-Minute Life Coach, it was a much longer podcast way back when conceived, and that was based on a lot of things that input from other podcasts. Essentially, the way podcasts were working at the time, I wanted to be in a certain formula. The podcasts at the time, depending on how long they were, most of them were 10-minute messages that went to about 15, 20 minutes, that opened up with a lot of pre-selling, a lot of, this is what's going on in my life. This is what's going on. This is why you should like me. This is the thing we're selling to keep this thing going, to keep it free or keep it not free, whatever. And then there was the message, and then on the back end, there was more selling. I created the podcast to do the first thing was give the lesson. The 10-Minute Life Coach was to give the lesson right off the bat within 30 seconds of the intro. From there was sort of the catch-up parts of, what's going on, how's life going, how's the podcast doing, and finally, there was the sales part. There was the part where we did the pitch for whatever it was we're trying to do to help support the mission and support the actual podcast. In most cases, in that case, way back when, it was for a paid version, which may or may not come back, called the $10 Life Coach, which was essentially an early shot at a life coaching community of people just kind of getting together, being there to help each other out and just be there for each other, offering guidance inside the group and offering support with me kind of there just hosting it for the most part. That was the way it was way back when. And then it died because things happened. Because basically doing that podcast in that format was a lot of work. And while work isn't a bad thing, it was a lot to get done. It was writing a script. It was going over lots of notes. It was doing a lot of editing and a lot of nitpicky things back in the day. Today, it's not the same way. The podcast was relaunched literally because somebody said, hey, man, I got to see you doing these other things. What about that life coach thing you had back in the day? So I got on the microphone. I did the spiel to see how it worked out, and it worked out fairly well. Second time around, it was the 10-minute lesson and then a bit of what's going on with all my workings, essentially the sales part and the what's going on part working together. And then that got kind of tedious and really confusing, so we killed it. This is now a very simple podcast, a very simple recording of me talking for 10 minutes on the lesson, although some things get mixed in that get kind of salesy sometimes, and then wrapping it up at around 10 minutes to just give you a very quick way to get in contact and talk on the back end. There's really no more sales pitches, no more pitching for other podcasts, other things, and we hope to keep it that way because that's sort of how this thing works. This works for me in a sense where I get to do something that's fairly quick, fairly consistent, fairly convenient the way it's done. And then I do lots of things with the information. I take the transcript and use it for other things, posts for other podcasts and things. We also put it on the website, which means more tooling on the website. If we have more content, we can play around with the website there as well. So fresh content always means fresh things to put out there, and your feedback always works as well. So that's how this thing got to be, how it's going. I found what worked, and I keep doing it. And like I said, it worked to just talk without any intros, without any music, without any fanfare, and that worked great until I figured out that the salesy stuff still wasn't working very well, so we stopped that. So this is now a 10-minute yak fest with maybe 2 minutes or so on the back end to kind of give you a wrap-up of how to get in contact. And that's what works for this podcast. That's what works for me in producing this podcast, going over the notes, going over the messages, and getting things out there. That's what seems to work for you, since if you're listening right now, it's apparently working so far. And for those folks who have found it here or there or will find it in the future, we hope it continues to work, where we just give you the lesson. There's a little less about me, actually a lot less about me in the mix of this podcast, but more in the out-scoping of things that can come. If you find that you have something that's working for you and you don't know exactly how, but it's just sort of working for the way it's going and it's going towards the positive, then keep doing that thing. Don't change that thing. Change things around it. If you're trying to lose weight and you find that if you get into the habit of literally eating the same thing every day, toast with butter for breakfast, a turkey sandwich for lunch, and then being consistent on dinner, do that for a while. If you do that, you may think you're missing out on something because of the variety and the choices out there. But that's kind of the problem with choices. Choices give you more choices to do things, and more choices, more ability to not do things. The fact that you have to choose between something makes it harder to do. I mean, everybody looks at Mark Zuckerberg as such a genius because he wears a hoodie every day, because he doesn't use the brain power to think about what he's wearing to work every day. But anyone who wears a uniform is doing the exact same thing. They don't worry about what they wear to work every day because they have a uniform that's done for a reason on a larger scale. His uniform just happens to be kind of slacker clothes, and he chooses that as opposed to wearing something that's more high-powered. But he also works in a tech world where he started off essentially sitting alone doing programming, so wearing a three-piece suit didn't make very much sense. So find something that works for you and stick with it for a while. And if it gets a little boring, see what needs to be done to spice it up. But sometimes it's the boring stuff that makes things go well. It's doing the consistent things over and over and over to make things go well, because it's not so much the instant gratitude you get from something. It's the sustainability where something happens. If you go to the gym on a consistent basis every single 3 days, every second day, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, like that 3 days a week, and you do that for a consistent level of time, and you do consistent exercises, you will notice that in enough time, you will see the difference. You'll be stronger. You'll be more fit. You'll have more energy. It will work itself out. It doesn't work itself out within 2 sessions. It works itself out with consistency. And then if you keep that consistency, keep doing that same thing, you'll find you will maintain where you are now. But then even if you want to increase more, you have to do something then to change something. You have to either add a little time to your workouts, or change the order of some workouts, or maybe add an extra exercise every other day to change things up. Once you change things up, then your body, in that sense, sees the difference and looks for how to get itself back to normal, and then that consistency will turn into something else. You do that consistently, you'll find a more change on that level there. But once you find something that's working, keep on doing it. If you find that you're a night person, so you move your schedule so you can do the bulk of your work at night, do that. If you're a day person, make sure you're doing your work in the day. If you need uninterrupted time between certain periods of time to get things done, that works out. You make sure you have a schedule that gives you that time so you can be consistent with that. Staying consistent, doing the things that work, are the way to stay on task, stay on track, and keep things moving in the right direction. And because we have a consistent podcast, we're able to wrap up a little earlier than 10 minutes a day. So I thank you so much for joining me for a 9-minute edition of the 10-Minute Life Coach. I'm Jay Cleveland Payne, and sometimes I forget to say that. It's something that doesn't come out consistently in the beginning. I'm Jay Cleveland Payne, and thank you so much for being a part of this thing here. For more information on the podcast, stop by the website 10minutelifecoach.com for more information about all the things going on in our very poorly designed website, which needs some updating, and we'll get to it soon, we hope. It is the letter J, Cleveland like the city, PAYNE.net. That is jclevelandpayne.net. Email me at info@jclevelandpayne.net or jclevelandpayne@gmail.com. The Gmail one's a bit spammy, but I do check that throughout the day. The other one gets checked on periodically because it's the business one, so that may take a little time to get back to you. But meanwhile, thank you so much for getting on with us and staying with us. We'll wrap this thing up right at 10 minutes for a change, so I think that's a pretty good pretty good bonus on the way. Thank you so much for being a part, and hopefully you'll be back next week for another edition of the 10-Minute Life Coach.